Good evening, brothers and sisters. I'm Brother Bigler, and I'll be conducting this meeting. This is the fourth in a series of 5 depression and anxiety workshops that Dr. Matt Nilsson has hosted for us. I've introduced him several times. I'll do that one more time. No? Dr. Nilsson is a clinical psychologist in the Air Force. He currently works as the director of mental health operations at Nellis Air Force Base. We're really pleased to have him and all the effort he's put into coming here and being here. We'd also like to thank those who have come and interpreted and those who have set up audiovisual. We appreciate all the efforts that go into this meeting. So this meeting, I'm going to ask Sister Cammie Charrington if she'd give us an opening prayer, after which we will turn the time directly over to Dr. Nilsson.
All right, good evening, brothers and sisters. It's great to be with you again. Does my sound okay in the back? Is it too loud? A little too loud? No? Good. Okay, feels loud to me. Hey, so it's great to be with you. Before we begin, that little slip of paper, right? So one of your homework assignments from last week was to start to stop and think about your thinking. You're going to start to think about your thinking, identify some of those negative thoughts that you were going through, and we're going to build off of that. Okay, so real quick, I want everyone on that slip of paper, I want you to write down the most frequent or an unhealthy thought that you had this week. Okay, so what was an unhealthy thought that you had this week? I want everyone to write down on a piece of paper what was the one unhealthy thought that maybe came to you more frequently than others. And then I'm going to ask my lovely bride here to go around, and she's going to collect those. Because don't put your name on it. I don't need to know your name. Okay, but I'm going to need your thought here for a second. So while Brandy's going around doing that, I'll share with you one of my unhealthy thoughts in jest and fun. And so we all know that BYU football is schizophrenic and can't seem to be consistent with anything. And so last week when they lost to Cal, I thought, oh man, here's last season all over again. Same mistakes. We don't have any playmakers, just no attitude, no energy. I said, this is going to be another really long season. In fact, after we lost last week, Brandy, the next morning, because it was a late game, Brandy the next morning said, hey, did they win? I said, no. And her first response was, are you okay? All right? I guess I must not handle defeat very well. And so I had these ruminating, awful thoughts towards the beginning of the week, and I had to stop myself and say, you know what? Why can't we be good? Why can't we play like we played against Arizona? Why can't we play with anybody in the country? Yesterday, we played the 6th-ranked team in the nation, and we were 21-point underdogs. So we were supposed to lose by 3 touchdowns. And my friend Steve, who I have referred many of you to, and Steve's actually going to be here tonight. He's running a little bit late, but he's going to help me later on tonight, so you can meet him if you feel like you want a therapist in the community. Anyway, so I text Steve yesterday coordinating this meeting and said, hey, Steve, BYU's going to win today. And he wrote back and he says, whatever you say. And they won. Okay, the power of positive psychology, right? Okay, so Brandy's going to go through those for me real quick, because we're going to find the thought that is the most frequent amongst the group here, because we're going to do an exercise, and I need a negative thought to do the exercise. So that's what it's for. So she's going to go through those real quick and find the most popular or the most common one. All right, so to reflect on last week's homework assignment, to stop and think about your thinking and to use that worksheet, right? I gave you that handout that had those list of questions on there to help you learn how to best analyze your thoughts and to kind of create better Christ-centered thoughts. So I wanted to get some feedback from you all from last week, if you'd be willing to share. Anybody have any experiences using that worksheet and in positives or negatives, or how you found some insight or anything like that? Would anybody be willing to raise their hand and share before I call on someone? Ooh, Sister Thomas.
So I just read it at a certain time of the day, not when something that got me upset. But I found that as I read through the whole thing, it calmed
Awesome. So President Thomas said that she read it at the same time every day. It wasn't necessarily when she was feeling upset, but she read it, reflected on it, and when she read through those questions and things, it really helped her feel at peace and calm her down. Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else like to share any experiences they had using the worksheet from this last week? Yes.
Actually, this helped calm someone else down.
Okay.
And, this person was kind of far-reaching and saying that the future was bleak and that, nothing was going to go right. And I got out my little worksheet and just, said, well, are you overreaching here? Are you thinking, are you kind of making up a future that maybe isn't based on factual evidence, sort of thing.
And did they respond to that?
Well, they did. I think that at first it's a negative response because it's like, don't tell me I'm wrong.
Wanted to be
Commiserate with me.
Right.
But then I think it helped me to be a better person to talk to because I wasn't getting emotional about it.
Right. Just took the emotion out of the game. Right? We don't need to be fortune telling, looking into the black abyss of the future. Woe is me, everything's going to be bad, and you just took emotion out. Let's just look at the facts. Right? Very good. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else like to share anything, any experiences? Yes, sir.
For me, the thought that, my mind is just all overwhelmed. In general, whatever it is, usually it's when I've got something just maybe a specific thing to do, but then for some reason, everything else that I have to do throughout the day just piles on top of that. And what I would do is, some of the, the exact phrases or the questions that was topical for me, it was kind of more like, when I make my own little revolt, I would just say it's kind of like you said there, like preachy, and like making too much out of it. And I would kind of have some, how can I break this down? To doable and the tasks, and that helped a lot. And also the idea that, I guess how Heavenly Father used me when I'm here, that here, because He sent me here, He's not going to leave me alone to do this. So I've got, not only can I break it down myself, but I've got
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So for those who may not have heard, things sometimes just feel overwhelming and they kind of just all pile up. And so he was able to kind of stop, kind of look back and say, what's so bad about this? And able to break things down a little bit, see kind of thing as they truly are, and really kind of help him to move forward kind of when you get stuck. Great examples. Thank you so much. Brandy, how are you doing with those so far? Doing pretty good so far? Okay. Thank you for sharing. Please continue to use that worksheet as you need to. Obviously, the hope is that you kind of have sort of memorized a lot of those questions in there so you can just naturally go and do it. Remember what we talked about last time, that you've got to, if you're going to change the way your brain operates, if you're going to change those definitions that are inside your brain, you've got to practice this about every day for 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, so it's a long haul. You finished week 1. Okay, so you got to find the motivation, find someone you can be accountable to, and check in with, and keep working on it. Keep plugging away bit by bit. Steve, why don't you come up here? So this is my friend Steve. Steve worked with me in the Air Force. You sit next to here by Brandy, Steve. I asked him to come today because he's going to help me with a little exercise later on. And so Steve is a social worker. He has a practice in Aliante. He's in the bishopric up there, and I would refer you to him. So if you want to talk to Steve later today too, you can do that. Okay, so many of you have asked about the recordings of this and handouts as well. If you go to YouTube and you just search Christ-Centered Depression and Anxiety Workshop, you will find this workshop. Thank you to Derek Fulkerson who put all that together. And so for your friends and family, people who haven't been here that you want to make sure that they listen to the workshop, they can go here. You can just search it. You'll find it. The handouts are not on there yet. But this week is the goal to make sure all the handouts are on there, and even today's will be on there sometime this week as well. Right? So please, if you've missed a workshop, if you want to get caught up, because the workshop kind of builds off each other, right? And we're on week 4. So if this is your first week, you're kind of in a hole, and it'll be difficult for you to understand some of the concepts, but you can go through and listen to that there. Okay. So today, what we're going to talk about, so on your handout here, you see on your handout, this is a worksheet. This is the gold standard for what we use in cognitive therapy. And there's, I don't want to do that. We call them ABC worksheets. Okay? So A, B, C. ABC. A is activating event. Okay? Or something happens. Something happens in your life. BYU football loses. And that's an event that causes you to have some negative emotions or negative thoughts. B are your beliefs. Okay? Or the things, the thoughts in your mind, those, what do you tell yourself in that situation? What is that negative thought? Those thoughts that you gave to me here just a second ago. And then C are consequences. Okay? And when we say consequences, usually we're talking about emotional consequences. What are the feelings? What are those emotions that you're experiencing? Is it stress, anxiety, hopelessness, sadness, et cetera, et cetera? And so this worksheet here is going to take us a step further and get us to be a little bit more technical on how we work through some of those negative thoughts. Steve, have you guys found a thought that you think would be good? I'm going to trust, Brandy's good at sorting, but I'm going to trust the clinician here to help me find a thought that we can work with tonight.
Yeah, so I think that a really good one would be,
I'm a failure. Wonderful. Okay, so what we're going to do, so you kind of understand the structure of tonight. So we're going to go through an example of how to use the ABC worksheet. I want everybody to, we're going to do the same example together. I want all of you to write it out because I need you to have a good example so when you go home, you know how to use the worksheet. Okay, and then at the end, we're going to give you time and you're going to do one for yourself personally. And then Steve and I are going to be available if you get stuck or you don't know how to overcome a certain thought, we're going to be here available. And you can come up and ask us questions, and we'll help you work your way through it. Okay? So my goal is to end at 7:30, and then to give you 30 minutes to work on your own, and to ask Steve and I some questions at the end. Okay. So the question, the thought was, I'm a failure. Okay. So everybody write that. Everybody write that in column B. Now, as we talked about before, some of you can be very good about identifying those thoughts. Some of you are going to feel things first, right? So if you're going through life and you feel something, you feel overwhelmed, you feel anxious, you feel hopeless, you might feel first, and that's fine. You can go ahead and write, I feel hopeless, but then you need to say, what am I thinking? Right? What is that thought? You still got to identify the thought, okay? So I am a failure. So someone can feel like a failure for lots of reasons. Can anybody just give me an example of an event, an activating event, or something happens? What would have happened for someone to have the thought, I am a failure? Can someone give me an example? Divorce? Okay, good one. Were you going to say something? Yes. Which one would you pick, Steve? Divorce or I forgot my daughter's DMV appointment? Divorce. Divorce wins tonight. Okay. So, and it may not be that your divorce is getting finalized or you've made that decision to divorce. It could be that you're having marital problems. Okay, I would assume that most of us in here at some points are having struggles with our spouses. Brandy and I certainly struggle with each other sometimes. It's part of life. That's part of marriage. Okay, you kind of learn how to work out your relationship. So this can be something that we can all relate to. If we're not even, if you're not to the point of divorce, you probably all have had some experiences where you've felt like you failed within your relationship. Okay, so pending a divorce, or you're getting a divorce, and you say, I am a failure. What kind of emotions, brothers and sisters, what kind of emotions would be associated with that thought, given that? Sadness. Okay. What else? Shame. Okay. Anger. Disappointment. Envy. Okay. All right, let's stop there. Now, so hopefully I want everyone to, their worksheet should look like this, okay? Let's go through, because on all of your emotions, when you do your emotions, I've got to rate them, okay, on a scale of 0 to 100, because I need to understand how intense those emotions are. Again, the idea of therapy and the idea of life is not to eliminate our emotions, right? It's not an on-off switch. It's about a dimmer, right? It's taking an emotion that's at an 80 or 90 and turning it down to a 30 or a 40 so that we can operate in life a little bit better. So, for someone who's going through a divorce and says, you know what, I am a failure, on a scale of 1 to 100, how would we rate our sadness? 90. Shame? 95. Anger? 70. Brandy gets really angry at me. She said 100. Disappointment? 100. Envy? 90. Okay. I'll take it. All right. So, the next step on here, brothers and sisters, you need to go down to that question there below. And it says, according to the gospel of Jesus Christ, are my thoughts in B realistic? Explain why or why not, okay? This is where that handout that we gave you last week is really going to come into use for you. I want you to use that handout, use those questions that we had in there, and kind of identify, are these thoughts realistic? What are the facts? Okay? So, I want you guys to teach me here to answer that question, I am a failure. Are those thoughts real? Is that thought realistic? Why or no, why not? So Brandy said that maybe if I took a step back, that we know that marital conflict or any conflict with anybody isn't always about one person 100% wrong, but sometimes it's two people, right? Two people in a relationship can have responsibility in that. Right. And I guess that's the hard part about this class, right? So in therapy, we would know those facts, right? If I was sitting down individually with somebody, I would know the circumstances of why are you getting that divorce? Was there abuse history? Was there infidelity? What was kind of the thing that kind of caused a lot of that divorce? Kind of hard in this group setting to kind of really understand how that works, right? So we are kind of stuck in this limbo of kind of being in generalities and not knowing exactly. But that could play a big part as far as, am I a failure? Is that reality or not, right? Did I do something so offensive that I am a failure? But even if you did something offensive, and you were having all of these symptoms and feelings, or you were the mom who forgot the DMV appointment, right? And you're having these feelings of like, oh, I'm such a failure. I totally failed my child who really wanted their driver's license. Look at me, I'm a bad mom. I would say that there's probably still a healthier way of thinking about the situation, right? Even if you've done a mistake, because we've all made mistakes, there's probably ways of overcoming that a little bit. Okay, Tom?
Yeah, because failure just sounds so permanent. Whereas I've made mistakes and I can correct these mistakes, and it might take some help from somebody else to get through this. The failure sounds like loss of
Yeah, so
very permanent.
So failure so what he said was failure sounds very permanent, right? That you've done something that can't be fixed, that is irreparable damage, and there's nothing that can be done, that there's no hope.
If I could, on the sheet, it might be also helpful to write, are my thoughts to be realistic or helpful? Because sometimes our thoughts might be somewhat realistic. I might feel like we failed when we have made some bad mistakes. But it's helpful to tell myself I am a failure with every mistake.
Good. Yep, so adding on there, not just being realistic, but also, are my thoughts helpful? Okay, good. Yes, sir.
Thinking about, according to the gospel of Christ, makes me think of the example of the younger and sons of Messiah. They were the political violence sinners, yet they were forgiven. And to me, that's impacted me a lot in the way I choose to think about myself. Because we can't feel like it's such a permanent thing. I was mentioning before failure. Oh my gosh, divorce sealed the temple. It's my exaltation. And I fail with that. I don't know what to do. And, we're not necessarily getting divorced because we are horrible people. It's going to be difficult. It's work. And, we're trying to be better. So I think that I compare that to a lot of violence of sinners. I hope I don't think I am. If they could get forgiveness, I think I can change it.
One,
It's not so bad.
yeah, wonderful. So he brought up an example in the Book of Mormon where we have the sons of Mosiah and Alma the Younger who were just very bad sinners and doing a lot of bad things for the church and for people. And they too were able to receive forgiveness for their sins, right? And able to overcome those things. So who am I to say that I can't overcome whatever it is that happened in my relationship that made me feel like a failure? Okay, so under that question then, are my thoughts be realistic according to the gospel of Jesus Christ, or are they helpful? I want you to write something in there, okay? I'm not going to tell you what exactly to write there. I'm assuming that the overall consensus here is that there probably is some room here to say that that thought of I am a failure is not true, that that's not based on fact, that we are inherently divine, that we are literally children of God, that we can overcome bad mistakes, and that it's part of life, that we're going to make mistakes, that it's okay, that you can move forward in a positive way and find peace through the gospel. Okay? So write something like that there. And now, the next piece on there, the next question is, what can I tell myself on such occasions in the future when you think about your divorce that would be more consistent with gospel principles? Give me some examples of what you could tell yourself as you go through your worksheet and you create healthier, Christ-centered thoughts. What could be some examples of things you could tell yourself as you think about your divorce, right? Because your divorce may be out of your control too, right? Because a divorce is a two-person street. It's out of your control. The divorce is going to go forward. What can you tell yourself to kind of help you better cope with that really difficult time of your life? So you could say things like, I can control what I can control. I can control my everyday decisions. I can control to be positive. I can control to read my scriptures, to turn myself to Christ, to find meaning and positive things I can do. Right? Is that what you're saying? Okay, very good. Okay, so that's a great thing that you can put in there for sure. Great one. What else? Yes? So what did Isaiah do? Yeah, so part of that thought is, you know what? I've been commanded to forgive either myself or forgive my spouse, right? That we could utilize the atonement of Jesus Christ to access the principle of forgiveness and the miracle of forgiveness, right? Great book. And be able to help heal and move forward in a positive way. Okay?
Instead of saying I am a failure, you could say I made some mistakes.
Yeah, so instead of saying I am a failure, you could say I made a mistake or I made a bad mistake. And that would be okay, right? We make mistakes. Okay? So it's just a reframe of just acknowledging that we made a mistake. Okay, good. Yes?
My marriage failed, said I'm failing, but I can have hope in Christ to continue on with forward.
Yeah, so my marriage, instead of saying I'm a failure, we could just say my marriage failed. And I've got to look to Christ, and I've got to find a way to move forward and kind of move on and reestablish. Okay, wonderful. Okay, good. Now, in the future, so the next question down here, getting back to C, consequences. If a similar event happened in the future and you had more Christ-centered thoughts, the ones you just wrote down, what emotions or feelings would you think are experienced? So if you're thinking about your divorce that's pending and you got a lawyer appointment or you're going to court or you're splitting time with the kids or whatever, but instead, magically, right, because you've been working on your Christ-centered thoughts, and the automatic thought that came out of your mind were these more Christ-centered thoughts. It was a mistake. I can move forward. I can find forgiveness. I can do these things. If those just kind of came forward to you automatically, what kind of emotions would be associated with those thoughts? Some hope? Yep. Huh? Determination? Okay. Write those down. Hope, determination. What else? Compassion? Yeah. If you're forgiving. Compassion. You'd kind of see things as Christ would, right? With godly sorrow, unconditional love. Yep. Well, no. Just on the bottom there. So where it says, down there at the bottom, I want you to kind of just list out those emotions there. Yep.
I think you still have sadness and disappointment, but maybe just
Yep. I totally agree. So you will experience sadness. You will experience, what did you say? Disappointment. You going to experience any anger? Maybe. Okay? Again, the idea is not to take away our negative emotions. We need them. It's part of life. We're not going to pretend that we're not going to have negative emotions when we're going through a divorce. Okay, so let's label them real quick. Okay, scale of 1 to 100. Hope. Scale 1 to 100. How much hope would you have in that situation? Going to court today. How much hope do you have? 50. 50. Okay, determination. How much determination? 75. Compassion. Huh? 20? Brandy also, Brandy doesn't have a lot of compassion for me. And so we hope that she's not called as a compassionate service leader. What? Well, it doesn't matter. Compassion towards yourself, compassion towards the other. It depends on the situation. It depends on why you're getting the divorce, right? But if you have been able to access the atonement of Christ and really forgive somebody and see them as Christ would see them, can you have compassion towards someone who's offended you? 50? That's it. Okay? Take it. Sadness. Sadness. 70? All right, fine. I don't like that very much, but I'll take it for right now. What else? Oh, I'm sorry. Disappointment. 50. Anger. 30. Okay, so you can kind of see on here, right, brothers and sisters? So what you need to notice that when you create those Christ-centered thoughts in your brain and you automatically have them, I want you to notice the difference in emotion, the difference in consequences. It's much easier to deal with the divorce and court and custody battles and moving on with life and trying to reestablish your identity and how you go forward in the world if you have emotions here versus here. Would we all agree with that? You guys see how powerful that is? Okay, very hard to have a quality of life when you have all of these emotions with super high intensities. Where down here, again, we still have some negative emotions. They're just a little bit more manageable. We can more easily confront these trials and struggles that we have in our life, right? In a Christ-centered way. That's the goal. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about this example or about the worksheet, about what we did? Anything? No. All right. So this is what we need to do next. Sometimes, brothers and sisters, these thoughts, excuse me, these thoughts can be very vague. Inside your brains, psychologists we call it schema, or categories of information, or core beliefs. That kind of underline those thoughts, right? So when last week when we were here and we talked about the brain, right? We talked about inside your brain you have definitions of yourself, definitions of other people, and definitions of the world in general. Pretty much you've got a definition of everything. It is a lot easier in therapy, in cognitive therapy, when we try to help people kind of move forward in a positive way of not just addressing these first automatic thoughts that come out of our mind, but to try to dig deeper, to drill down and find out what's underneath that thought, and what's underneath that thought, and what's underneath that thought. And if I can get down to the core belief, and I can tackle that core belief, then it unlocks a lot of positivity, a lot of negative thoughts that kind of stem from that core belief, right? And so on this worksheet, you'll notice on here at the top, under the belief section, it says, hint, when your thoughts are too general, ask yourself why. Or why would that be, what would be so bad about that? So I'm going to go down this rabbit hole here with you for a little bit, and kind of what I like to do is I draw arrows, right, to show that I'm drilling down. Okay, so when I have this thought of, I am a failure, okay, that's where kind of some of these specifics about maybe the divorce would come in. Okay, but if you were going through a divorce and you said, I am a failure, give me an example. You know, where I guess I would say, why? Why are you a failure? I wasn't good enough. Great. Okay, so write this down, please, on your sheets. I wasn't good enough. Okay? And then so I'm going to ask again, why weren't you good enough? What is it about your relationship and the divorce that you're a failure? Why weren't you good enough? Prove that to me. I wasn't good enough. I made an eternal commitment. So Brandy says I made an eternal commitment, but I would... Okay, so you're saying that you're a failure because you broke an eternal commitment. Okay, and so it says I wasn't good enough, and I say, well, why weren't you good enough? And you said, because... I don't really like that thought, Brandy. Because I made an eternal commitment. I might get stuck on this one, Steve. I'm not going to ask Brandy for comments anymore. Okay? So, you're a failure because you broke an eternal commitment. I'm going to ask you, are you at fault for that?
I should have been more understanding. I shouldn't have yelled so much. I should have.
Okay, I wasn't good enough, so because you yelled so much, right? You weren't good enough because you yelled, you yelled a lot, or wasn't understanding, okay? Wasn't understanding enough to make that relationship work, okay? What would be so bad about that? If you yelled a lot and you weren't understanding to your spouse, what would be so bad about that? There'd be a lack of communication, okay? And so it would lead to a lack of communication and, huh? And it would lead to contention. Okay, and I'm going to ask you again, what would be so bad about contention or a lack of communication in a relationship? Lack of connection. Okay? Lack of connection. Why does that matter? Well, why does not yelling, not understanding, lack of communication, contention, the lack of connection, why does that matter? I'm focused on my needs more than theirs. Maybe. There's no love. Okay? Do you believe, are we getting down to this thought that if I have periods of time where I'm frustrated and I'm not empathetic and I argue and I yell at my spouse, that somehow I'm not worthy of being married? That a spouse is supposed to be loving and caring all the time without fail? Is that what we're saying? Is that our core belief? I think so. I think that that's where we're getting to, and especially in the church, where we have this idea of needing to be perfect, without blemish, without taking account our natural man and our natural bodies. Okay, that we think that we can go through life, and if we do have arguments, and we yell and we have a lack of communication, and sometimes there's some contention, that somehow it means that I'm breaking an eternal covenant, which also means that I'm not good enough, which also means that I'm a failure. And I would challenge that. I would challenge that. Are we really expected to be perfect? Can we be perfect in our marital relationship? I don't know any perfect marital relationship. Okay? I don't know any. Zero. I don't know any relationship where a couple has not yelled at each other, or they haven't been frustrated with each other, or they haven't shown empathy and compassion. I don't know any. Okay? So if we're blaming ourselves for our divorce because we yelled and we didn't have some compassion and empathy, then I think, brothers and sisters, we don't understand the gospel of Jesus Christ. We don't understand our role in this mortal tabernacle, and we don't understand that we're going to make mistakes and that we're going to have a tough time. And even in our relationships, we've got to be forgiving of each other and be able to allow our partners also to make some of those mistakes as well. Yes, ma'am.
What if, like, the person is building, I know that, my failure, but if you're dealing with depression, anxiety, and it's a real thing, and then your spouse doesn't understand that, and it leads to divorce, because the spouse is not understanding, but you still, the person still feels like I am a failure. I made this eternal covenant, marriage, and I'm a failure. And it's really hard to just get those thoughts out.
Yeah.
Think about,
So the question or the comment was, this can be really hard, right? And those thoughts of I am a failure can be really hard to break. You can be stuck with those thoughts. You're exactly right, which is why I'm forcing you to write these things down on paper, to really put a hard look based on the gospel of Jesus Christ. How would Christ want me to view this situation about myself, about my spouse, about our society, our church? How can I think about these things in a Christ-centered way, this awful event that's happening to me? Am I really a failure? And if you go through this, based on that comment, I am a failure, I'm pretty sure that 99.9% of the time, a realistic person has to come up with a conclusion that you truly are not a failure in the sight of God. It will take time, but it takes real, honest, hard work. Okay, being very, very brutally honest with yourself, getting down to those core beliefs, right? So on here, what I'd like for you to do on your papers, somewhere down there in the belief column somewhere, write core beliefs. Get to your core beliefs. Okay? Because that's really where I want you to get to. I want you to drill down until you get to that core belief. And I think on this one, the core belief is, I need to be perfect and loving and smiley all the time with my spouse. And if I'm not, then I don't deserve to be in this relationship and I have failed. Okay? And that's not our life, and that's not how God designed us.
So you're saying, not what our actual core belief is, but what the core belief of what that initial statement is. Right? Is that what you're saying here now?
We are trying to get, right, so we started with I am a failure. I'm trying to dig down until you find your core belief.
But not what, like, nobody's core belief is really that. But you're saying,
No, that is the core belief. The core belief is I need to be perfect. That's what's causing the thought, I am a failure.
Okay. So it seems like you drill down until you get to that core belief, and then you see if that core belief is realistic and helpful.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right. So you drill down, so you start here and you drill down until you find the core belief, and then you ask yourself those questions at the bottom. Is this thought realistic or helpful according to the gospel of Jesus Christ? Is that core belief? And really tackle that core belief. If you can tackle these up here, and that's good, and it will get you some benefit. But if you want the biggest bang for your buck, you've got to identify your core beliefs. If you get to your core beliefs and you break those open and you create healthier, Christ-centered ways of thinking, man, you're going to make a lot of improvement very quickly. Okay, if you can do that. Okay, so it's just a little bit tricky sometimes to get down there, which is why I always recommend that you get individual therapy, right? Because if you can do this with an individual therapist and really have the therapist really help you identify those core beliefs, and then you start tackling those, man, you really do. You make a lot of change pretty quickly and make a significant change in your life, okay? And sometimes you need individual therapy to do it. But you should try. Go for it. But if you get stuck, that's what therapy is for.
I'm thinking that the process of drilling down is necessary because if someone were to tell you what the end result is, you would probably deny that that's your core belief. I don't do that. But then when you drill down, you get to that core belief, and oh wow, I guess I really do believe that. And that's when you change.
Right, so he was saying that drilling down might be a really important thing to do, because if you just jumped straight to the core belief, someone might be really defensive. Like, no, I don't think that way at all. Right? But if they themselves personally go through step by step and drill down and they come to that conclusion on their own and they find their core beliefs, then they can accept it like, oh, I guess that is my core belief and I've got to fix that.
I think sometimes the hard part about doing this on your own is you get so caught in just your way of thinking, you really can't step outside of that. So, I don't know, in my family we call it like our person. Like, you have a person that will always tell you the truth, will always tell you what you're thinking is right or not, or bring in other, ways of, like doing that, but it has to be like, the trust this person, and you're like, hopefully that's your stuff. My mom's a therapist, so that's probably why we kind of do things over. But like I've watched that sometimes where I get so caught and so frustrated with just doing it one way, and my husband will say, like realistically, like if you thought of it this way or if you thought of it that way, and sometimes you do get so caught in that you can't drill down because you're stuck in the only way you can do that, and you do need someone else.
Yeah.
To step in.
You really do. You need a trusted agent, someone that you can trust and that you can be accountable to help you sometimes go through these steps. That sometimes it's really hard to do on your own because you're just stuck in your own brain, which is really why, additionally, I want you to step back. So here's the problem with therapy, okay? Therapy is only as good as the therapist's view of the world. Why do I say that? We all have different views of the world. We talked about that last week. We all identify and define things in the world a little differently. Even your therapists do. I see the world a little different than Steve does versus somebody else. Most of therapists in the world are not members of the church. They're not Christian. We're a very atheist group. And so when we when we identify their core beliefs and we help them create healthier thoughts, typically we do that in a way that the world, society wants you to think. Kind of a healthy way of thinking for societal purposes. We in the church, we as Christians know that the best way of thinking about the world is to see things as God sees them. That's where the power is. That's what's so good. Which is why I would always encourage you to seek out a therapist who has a worldview of understanding the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because you want to develop your brain, when you attack those core beliefs, when you look at your world and you're trying to change those definitions of yourself, others, and the world, I want you to do it in the way Jesus Christ has taught us to do it, according to the Scriptures. Okay, and that's what I did. I took a 2-year journey going through the Scriptures and figured out ways in which Christ wants us to think. And so I'll give you some ideas here of things some topics of definitions that you can use to help you find definitions of yourself, others, in the world, some of these core beliefs. Okay, so here's some topics that I came up with that I've wrote about in my book. So under the self category, you can do some research on your own, kind of figure out how God wants you to think about self-esteem or self-worth, about being a child of God, about faith, about fear and not being alone during hard times, about forgiving yourself, about honesty, gratitude, humility, and pride. For others, some things that you can start thinking about is, how do you define who your neighbors are? How do you define your spouse, your children? How is your patience, love, and charity? How do you define service to others? What about forgiveness of others? What about being judgmental? What about things like lust and affairs or pornography? The world. So looking at the world and the community that you live in, how do you define that? How do you define Las Vegas, Sin City, right? How do you appreciate or define nature or God's creations? And then lastly, hope. Hope for a better future. Hope through the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so if you look at some of these topics as you kind of try to figure out how to find those core beliefs, try to look to the Scriptures and see what God's taught you to do. Because that's where you're going to get, it's better for you to help you. Because a secular therapist is not going to get to that level. And we know that that's where you're going to get the biggest peace and the most joy in your life, is if you can center your brain on the way Christ wants you to do, which is why we call it Christ-centered thoughts. Okay? Good. Yes, sir.
I think also someone who doesn't want to do the exercise, so they want to stay in the hot failure, and they're not willing to consider what the root cause of it is. It's just wait till they're ready to do that.
Yep. They can't. No one can do this work but them. Okay. So the question is what do you do with somebody who is unwilling to challenge their thoughts, unwilling to go through these exercises? What do you do? Do you just have to wait? And the answer is yes. You can't force anyone to go through this, and if they don't have intrinsic motivation, it's not going to work. So what I would do is I would just try to focus on those behavioral interventions that we talked about during weeks 1 and 2. Doing exercise, being more social. If it's anxiety, starting to expose yourself to those things that you're anxious to. I would just, if I have a loved one, I'm going to trick them into going and doing those things with me. Not to know that I know that this is going to help them and help their brains, but I'm just going to do it just to get them going. And maybe later on, once they start feeling better, maybe they'd be more willing to engage those negative thoughts. But that's where I'm going to start if someone's not willing to participate. But generally speaking, some people are not going to be willing to make a change in their life until their life is so bad. And it can be a pretty steep drop to find that low for some people. Same thing for addiction. Okay, so
It seems like there's some people who don't find some sort of
Yeah. So some people find pleasure being in this condition or staying in a low point, right? So for some people who deal with this on a chronic basis, it's very comfortable for them. And they feel very comfortable feeling low. They do sometimes enjoy it. You can break out of it, but again, I would try to get them into therapy. I would try to get a therapist to kind of help crack that nutshell, because it can be a difficult road, but there's absolutely hope to do that. You just got to just look help them stand back and see the bigger picture and say, look, this is your life. What is it that you really enjoy about being low when you could be here and experiencing some joy? What's so bad about experiencing joy, right? Is there a core belief down there that says, I'm worthless and I deserve to feel low, right? And then trying to challenge that core belief. Okay, good. Any other questions about this? The worksheet. You guys know how to use the worksheet? You can go through and do it? Okay, so we gave you extra copies of the worksheet so you can make copies on your own. You can go and use this worksheet for the next several weeks for as long as you need to kind of help figure out those thoughts and challenge them. That's your homework. I mean, this is what we do for the rest of therapy, is really work on these specific thoughts.
You sort of touched on it, but are there words for that you look for that you know you're getting close to a core belief? It's going to stop. I think you should sort of as an aside, you can get stuck something going on. Rather than a whole week.
Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, are there ways to know when you get close to that core belief? Unfortunately, I don't have a trick. I don't know, Steve, if you've got a trick to know exactly when you've hit that core belief. I don't, but I think that if you even just go a couple layers down, then you're going to have a lot of benefit, right? So even if you're not really sure if you hit that core belief or not, I mean, don't go forever, right? I mean, you could go forever down this hole. Okay, I mean, at some point, you kind of have to wrap it up and look at the theme of what you're writing about there and kind of put it all together into a core belief. Well, hopefully it won't take you an hour, but I mean, yes, right? Don't go forever. Stop yourself at some point. Look, it's what we did here too, right? So here we didn't necessarily come to that core belief. I kind of got you there, but I did. I looked at the trends of what we were talking about here, and I put them together, and I said, oh, I see. You're not allowed to yell at your partner. You're not allowed to be frustrated. Steve?
Something that might be also helpful is asking yourself if you can recall the first time you had this thought. So I am a failure, right? It might not be just because you're divorcing that you said this to yourself. You may have said this to yourself before. If you can find kind of when this began, you might be able to get to that core belief. When you start to adopt I am a failure, because you made mistakes, and mistakes are all of them. I'm not allowed to make mistakes. Mistakes are imperfect. And so that might be one way to find it.
Yeah, these core beliefs all started somewhere in your experience through something that happened. These thoughts started somewhere. So I mean, if you can identify an event that happened to you in the past where these core beliefs started, that's even much better to do. Very good.
So once we identify the core belief, if we recognize that it's not true, even though we may have believed it for so many years, how do we all of a sudden switch and have it not be that default thought?
Yes. Were you here last week?
Yes.
So the way you make it switch is you use the worksheet, you create that healthier thought, and then you got to remind yourself of that healthy thought just about every day for 4 to 6 weeks. And so when you think about the divorce, when you think about something, you've got to implant that positive thought. And if you repeatedly do that over enough time, 4 to 6 weeks, you will make change in your brain. It will automatically start doing it in the future. Okay, it just takes repetition. You just got to keep telling yourself. Being very genuine, right? We're not trying to lie to ourselves. This is truth. We're just speaking truth according to the gospel of Jesus Christ. I am a child of God. That's truth. No matter what I have done, I can be forgiven of my sins, and I have divine potential. It doesn't matter anything else. And so if I can truly hold on to that truth, and I tell myself that over and over and over again, in 4 to 6 weeks, you're going to have that thought more ingrained in yourself, that you truly are divine and have potential. Okay? Wonderful. Last thing I'll say here is that you need to strive for consistency. We've talked earlier in this workshop, someone brought up something about an exercise diet. Your brain is like an exercise diet plan. Most people, when they go on a diet, they have a goal of losing the weight, and then they lose the weight, and then what happens? They go right back to their lifestyle, right? They stop exercising, they stop eating well, they stop doing all the things that help them get to this healthy weight that they wanted. They just stop. The same thing's going to happen to your brain. Okay, so if you work at this for 4 to 6 weeks, you really feel like you're on cloud 9, you're doing really well, you have a great relationship with your Savior, you're feeling the Spirit in your life, you feel better, not as depressed and anxious, and then you just stop, and you don't pay attention to your thoughts anymore. Then 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, you're going to find yourself pretty close to where you are currently. And the reason is because we live in a fallen world, because we are the natural man, and we are constantly bombarded by negativity and chaos and sin in our lives all the time. And that influence has an impact on our brain. It has an influence on how we interpret and see the world. It changes us. And so if you stop for a prolonged period of time, those things will come back into your brain, and you'll start thinking that way again, because that is the natural man. And we live in a natural fallen world. Okay? So what I would like for you to do is pull out those worksheets, maybe about once or twice a year, right? Once every 6 months, just depending on when you need it. When you notice, like, oh man, I'm getting some negative thoughts creeping back in, maybe you need to just pick this back up, listen to the recordings, I guess, on the YouTube channel, and go through the system again, okay? Little booster session for yourself. Okay, you're going to need to do that as you go throughout life. And it's not going to stop, okay? We're on an eternal road, right? Straight and narrow is the gate, and we've got to endure to the end. Same thing with our thoughts, okay? As long as you're living and you have a natural brain, these are the things that we're going to have to do, okay? So what we're going to do now is I'm going to ask each of you on another one of those sheets. I want you to create a worksheet right now. We're going to give you 30 minutes. We're going to create a worksheet that's personal to you. What are something that you're really struggling with? What are those thoughts that you're having? And I want you to fill it out to the best you can. Steve and I are going to be up here on both sides of the room. So when you get stuck, you're going to come up here and ask Steve and I for some assistance to help you get unstuck, or to help you figure out that core belief, or to help you figure out those emotions or those negative thoughts, or a healthier way of thinking about the situation. Okay, so that's what Steve and I's role is going to be. We'll be up here for the remainder of the time. But let me end here with my testimony. My testimony is that I know that these principles that we're talking about work. We use them all the time. I've used them with thousands of patients, and it works. It is powerful. As we combine the gospel of Jesus Christ into this work, they become even more powerful. You will find yourself having a higher quality of life. You will find yourself feeling more in tune with the Spirit. Your testimony of your Savior will grow. You will feel His love surround you. I know this to be true. I love you guys. This has been such an honor for me to be here with you. Next week is the last week. We're going to talk about sleep issues. And so I hope you join me, because a lot of us struggle with sleep. Sleep is a very common symptom of people who are struggling with depression and anxiety. For all of your friends who don't have depression and anxiety, but they have sleep problems, bring them, okay? Sleep is a huge thing in our society. People are getting far too little sleep and far too bad quality of sleep. So please bring everybody. Next week it will be our last session, and we'll figure out how to help you start sleeping better. And these things I say in the name of Jesus Christ, amen. All right, can I get a closing prayer, and then we'll just go for as long as you want to, and Steve and I will be up here to help you with things. So, President Stephan, can I ask you to pray?